Hey everyone, I'm Nikki Vachon. I'm a college access counselor with the Finance Authority of Maine, and I'm joined by the lovely Maria McDougall. She's going to be monitoring the chat. She's going to be piping in. I hope she pipes in often, so you don't just have to listen to me go on and on. I love to hear other people's experiences because my experience in a financial aid office would be different from hers. So it's always great to get a couple of different perspectives. So today's topic: financial aid offers, questions and answers. I'm willing to bet you guys have had some questions come already. My inbox is starting to light up with questions about, I got this aid offer, what does this mean? So we're going to go over a little bit behind the scenes. I'm going to show you a little behind the curtains of what it looked like for me working in the financial aid office, what that process looked like. So we're going to talk about what happens and when, how is financial aid calculated? What does this all mean? Like this, can I afford school? That's what I hear a lot. And what's the best way to compare aid offers to really get at what that cost is going to be for that student? And the number one, is this affordable? Can I pay for school? So that's really the end goal I want us all to be able to work with. So let's jump right in. What happens and when? So this is, I'm a visual learner. You're going to see this time and time again today, but I love to have like a map of like what happens and when. And this is like the life of financial aid per year. So starting up with the student and one parent, if they're a dependent student, will create an FSA ID. That's the username and password that the student needs to get into the FAFSA and apply for financial aid. They do that at studentaid.gov. They're only going to do this once. It's tied to your social security number, so you can't create a new one every year. So I think it's super important as you guys work with students that they make sure that they document that FSA ID. I work with some students on Monday when a bunch of them have filed the FAFSA, and I said, okay, who remembers what their username and password is? Not one hand, not a one. So it's super important that we remember what that username and password is. We can fix it if you don't know, but it's just an easier pathway if they know it. Once they get that username and password set up, we can go in and complete the FAFSA. The FAFSA needs to be done every single year. So I always tell people, grab your phones. Let's set a reminder that repeats annually in October to do the FAFSA. Once you submit the FAFSA, every school you listed on there, you can list, well, let me see, we can go up to more than 10 now, I think, but it used to be that we could list only 10 schools. Every school you listed is going to get the FAFSA. They're going to get a copy of that. Once you get accepted at that school, the financial aid office can look at your FAFSA and they can review your eligibility and see what age you're eligible for. And that's going to happen every single year. The process looks a little different from year to year. I did at my school, but this is something that we do every year. Caveat to that, I will mention that before a school will send an aid offer, sometimes if the school student is selected for verification, the student might receive something that says, hey, we got your FAFSA, but we need you to verify your income before we can tell you what your aid is going to be. So before they get the aid offer, you might get something that says, hey, we need a little bit more information. But if not, or at my school, we sent aid offers to all of our students, even the ones that were selected for verification. We just said it was an estimated aid offer. And if a student was selected for verification, which just means the school is required to collect some more documents, that was listed there. So the financial aid office gets the FAFSA, they're going to send a notice to the student, and that's that aid offer. And that's kind of where we're at right now. A lot of schools have just started sending out aid offers. I've only heard of a couple schools that have done this. So it's great to hear what you have seen so far for aid offers that are out there. Once the student gets that aid offer, maybe they've gotten more than one, the student really should look it over. We're going to compare. I'm going to show you how to compare it. But then they need to tell the school they want that money. So a lot of times the school will ask for a few more steps to say, yes, I'm going to be a student, I want that money. So at my school, they would send back a form saying I want the aid. But I think now more schools are moving to portals where they log on and check off what they want to receive. So it's different at every school, but just keep in mind the student has to say, hey, I want that money. Then once the school knows you want that money, they're going to go out and get that money for you. So they're going to process that aid. They may contact the students to say, hey, I need, a few more documents, or we need a little bit more information. So I always say it's important, again, for students to be watching their email and their mail in case they get a notice that they need some more information. But once that aid gets processed, when the student gets that bill, probably this summer, the aid should be there, but it's usually listed as like pending. Like the school hasn't received the money yet. So it's like estimated or pending. That's what it said at my school. So that's kind of the life of what happens. Any questions on this, Maria, before I move forward? Okay. All right. So what is an aid offer? Well, really it's just a document saying, if you come to my school, this is how much aid we can offer you. What happened in my school is that like once a week, the admissions office would send me a list of students that were accepted. I would go out and grab the FAFSAs of those students and we'd send aid offers to them. So really it's just a notice of, if you come to my school, this is what you can get for aid. The aid offer may all look different. This is 3 samples that I have that we're going to use today. They all look different, but the federal government requires that they have the same pieces. So even though they look different, there are a lot of the same things that are listed on there, and they list a different breakdown of types of aid and amounts of aid offer. So that's what we're going to dive a little bit into. But before we get there, this is a little bit more behind the curtain. How is financial aid calculated? So all schools use this formula, and this is federal regulation. The feds tell us how we can do this. We use this formula: cost of attendance minus EFC equals need. So keep that in mind. That's kind of like our mantra. All right. Cost of attendance is made up by a bunch of different things. I'm going to show you in the next slide, but it's the cost of an estimate of one student in that program, what it costs them to attend. The EFC is the results of the FAFSA. That's that number at the end of the FAFSA that the student has. That's the results. Little caveat, just want to give you the heads up. In the academic year 24-25, that name is going to be changed to Student Aid Index. I want to keep using that word just to keep reminding folks that that's coming down the pike. But for now, all I want you to remember is cost of attendance minus EFC equals financial need, right? And so because each school costs something different, the need's going to be different at every school, but that EFC stays constant. That is the results of the FAFSA the student has, and at school A, B, and C, the EFC is the same, but the need might look different because the cost of each school is different. So that's what that looks like. Okay, so how do schools fill that need? So we have our this is our formula in a more of a picture form. As I said, I'm a visual learner. Cost of attendance can be made up of tuition and fees, books and supplies, housing and food, otherwise known as room and board, transportation, miscellaneous. There's a bunch of things a school can count. That's that COA, the cost of attendance, minus the EFC, that's the red block. The difference between the two is that financial need, and the school can fill it with whatever eligibility the student has. And this is all need-based aid, the federal Pell Grant, the Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant, Main State Grant. Maybe the school has some scholarships. The direct subsidized loan, not unsubsidized. The subsidized loan is a need-based program. So keep in mind that unsubsidized loan, that's not included in this calculation. Or work study. These are all need-based aid programs. So a school can plug in whatever the student's eligible for. Sometimes there's a gap. Sometimes the school can't meet full need. At my school, we rarely could meet it. And in fact, some schools build in a gap, and that happens. But just keep in mind that that's this formula that we have to work with. And a little bit later, I'm going to talk about how if a student gets a scholarship, sometimes that can affect the aid that they receive, but like rarely. And I'm going to show you what that means. Okay, so hang on to that for a second. Okay, so what's on the financial aid offer? So there's 3 basic types of aid. There's gift aid. This is grants and scholarships. This is money that does not have to be repaid. I've seen some aid offers that it actually says free money on it, which I love because it's a gift. It's free money you don't have to repay. Federal direct loans. This is any student can get this because the student did the FAFSA, and this is money they do have to repay later. Work study is a job on campus, and this is something that the student may or may not use. But when you see it on the aid offer, just keep in mind, it's not there to pay the bill. It's money the student can earn, get a job, get a paycheck, pay for, the necessities, pizza, books, laundry, things like that. I'd love it if you paid the bill with it, but students have expenses. So that's usually what happens. At my school, we didn't have enough work study funds that the federal government gave us to hire all the students we needed. So you wouldn't see on the aid offer that we also had another pot of money called Job Bank. So if a student didn't see work study on their aid offer, but they did want to work, go see the work study office. Maybe they can get some. It's not like out of the picture. How and when will they arrive? So at my school, we sent a paper letter to incoming students. We would only send them one. I would send a copy if someone requested it, but just keep in mind that the incoming students would get a mail copy. Returning students, we would email that to them. A lot of students are seeing this now on a portal, so every school does it a little bit different. But just keep in mind that right now, the financial aid offices are working to get those out as hard as their little hearts will let them. I can tell you that I personally felt the super pressure to get those aid offers out as soon as I could. So keep in mind that when people like students really want to see what it is, the schools are working super hard to get those out right now. Arriving as we speak.
I would add, Nikki, that I know after the pandemic, during the pandemic, a lot of schools just pivoted away from mail because there physically wasn't anybody there to stuff envelopes. So you may or may not get a paper. I think some went back to that. I think some just stuck with monitoring the email on the student portal. So if you've got a student who's not so great at monitoring those types of things, now is the time to coach them into you're going to have to start paying attention to those digital delivery services.
Great point. Any other questions before we move on? No. Okay. Awesome. Thank you for that. Yeah, I think the pandemic changed a lot of what we do. Okay, so remember how I said the aid offers look different, but all the same pieces usually. Okay, so let's look at this. Gryffindor College. Aid is broken down and totaled by category. We've got gift aid, work study, and federal loans. And I love how these are all broken out separately. I think that's super nice. And it even says free money under grants and scholarships. I always tell people, go and look to see how did you get those grants and scholarships and how do you keep them, right? If I wasn't going to play Quidditch, am I going to get a Quidditch scholarship every year? Probably not. At my school, we had scholarships for certain majors, and if you switch majors, you might lose that money. For those renewable scholarships, the ones we get every single year, we had a grade point average you had to keep. So always look at how do I get that money? How do I keep it? Work study, again, it's an earned paycheck that the student can work and earn. And then federal loans, you can see there's the direct subsidized and unsubsidized loan that's broken out into those two pieces. Subsidized meaning the government pays the interest while you're in school. Unsubsidized meaning the interest is going to accrue once the school receives the money. Super important to point out with those loans, it's a really flexible program. If you don't want that, I see students who say just give me all the money, right? But if you don't need those loans, you don't have to accept them. If you need a piece of it, you can accept a piece, but realize the rest of it is sitting there waiting for you to tap into later if you do need it. So keep in mind that I always tell people, try really hard to pay that bill without tapping into your loans, but know it's a safety net. If you need that next semester, it's there waiting for you. Okay. All right. So that's there. You're going to see cost of attendance. Remember that COA in that formula? That's here. I like how this is broken out, direct costs and indirect costs. Direct costs are things that are on the student's bill. Indirect costs are things that the student should think about, but you're not going to be billed for them. It's like a book or supply or shampoo, pizza, laundry, things like that. There's some assumptions listed, and I think it's important for students to look at this just to make sure everything's accurate. Are you going to be full-time? Are you going to be living on campus? At my school, we had on-campus housing grants. And maybe when the student applied, they were thinking about living on campus, but maybe they changed their mind. Well, I need to know in the financial aid office, because maybe you got something because you were going to live on campus. So that might be a surprise that was taken away when you decided not to live on campus. Also, you might see an estimated bill. I love that, because that does all of the work for us that we're going to do in a minute, right? When I look at this aid offer, what I'm looking for is how much am I going to have to pay out of pocket for 1 year? And this does the math for me. Love that. Super pretty. Okay, so let's look at Capital University. Same stuff. Aid broken down into 3 different categories: grants and scholarships, loans, work study. I like that. Same pieces. Remember that cost of attendance? That's here too. It's just in a different place. It's also not broken out into direct and indirect. It's just kind of a chunk, which is great. I like to have those costs there. That's very handy. Sometimes it's not listed on the aid offer and you have to go onto the website to look for it, or maybe it came with the letter, but I like it broken down for me. The assumptions, again, super important to look at. Am I planning on living on campus? Am I going to be full-time? Sometimes it'll say the major that you're looking at. So just keep in mind, let's look at those assumptions, make sure it's all correct. And then this has some other financing options. Like, what if this aid isn't enough? There's also payment plans that are available. Like, you can take your bill that you're going to receive for the first semester and break it into chunks and pay it that way. And maybe you can do that instead of your loans. Or maybe you can do that in a combination of a little bit of loan. So super flexible there. They also list that there's private loans available. A private loan is a loan in the student's name with a cosigner. It's not always a guarantee that a student is going to be eligible for that. They have to be credit worthy. So when we look at loans being offered on here, that direct loan is the only one that's a guaranteed the student's going to get it. There to help pay the bill.
Nikki, we do have a question about loans, and I don't know if this is the right place, but since you mentioned it, I'll add, this question came in. So similar to FAFSA, do you have to apply for a Parent Plus loan or these types of loans every year, or do you do it once for all 4 years? And if you have to apply for multiple loans, when can you consolidate them? It's a really good question.
That is so good. Thank you for asking that. So the direct loan that's listed, the student fills out a loan application, and that is good for 10 years. So the student does this once, and it's like a line of credit. The student can get it every year. They just have to tell the school they want it. Parent Plus loans, those are in the parent's name and they are credit based. So the parent needs to apply every year and be approved every year. So that's amazing. Private loans, because they're credit based, the student and a cosigner, doesn't have to be a parent, do need to apply every single year again, because it is credit based. And then you're saying, when do you consolidate? Is that part of that?
Yeah, the second part of the question is, if you apply for multiple loans, when can you consolidate?
Okay. So consolidation would be taking a bunch of different loans and putting them into one. And that is something that is done after graduation. I feel, Maria, tell me what your thoughts are. I feel like consolidation is a thing that is going to be going away. And I think we might mean a couple things here. So consolidation to me would mean that you had a couple of different types of federal loans that you want to have all in one federal loan. I don't ever want you to take a private loan. Well, let me say don't ever. That's fierce.
I would say don't ever. I mean, I would say you rarely want to consolidate federal and private debt together, because there's so many repayment and forgiveness options built in on the federal loan side that do not exist in the private loan side. I actually have a friend living this nightmare right now, consolidated federal and private, and didn't get any of the pandemic benefits and can't get public service loan forgiveness, and it's a mess. Let's say you borrow from one lender. A student borrows from one lender freshman year, and then a different lender sophomore year because they wanted something different, and then a different one the third year or something. With private loans, they could consolidate all of those together into one loan if it was going to benefit them in terms of interest rate, or some kind of of benefit. I mean, some people just don't want to have to write, pay, I said write multiple checks, as though I still write checks, but send payments to multiple people. And so sometimes just having it in one. Generally, federal loans do get bought and sold, but they'll generally be in the same servicer when the student graduates. So they'll kind of exist in one place. So we can deep dive this. We have information about student loans and consolidation on our website and some YouTube videos, but we can certainly help you navigate that process. You could, there are pros and cons to private loan consolidation, and it's really, really student and family specific.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I was just going to caveat that with, it's going to be done after school when you're back, when you're in repayment, but please give us a call. I think that's so individualized that I'd really want to look at that, like whether or not you should or what pathway you should take. Thank you for that question. That's amazing. Okay, so third aid offer, Erudite College. This is what my aid offer used to look like, because the software I had very little flexibility on how I could, make it look, where it lists all of the aid in one block. And people often, when they see this, they will look at that. What's the total amount of money I can get? And they're like, yes, I can pay. But sometimes in this block, it might include things like work study or a Parent Plus loan, which is not a guarantee, right? So I always want people, if they get a block like this, to just go through piece by piece. I like to green highlight grants and scholarships because I'm color coding nerd. And then loan, I would put that as yellow. Work study, maybe blue, just so that you can see what aid types are, because we want to know really what that free money is. When we're going to compare costs, like what's going to be affordable option, I really need to break out that free money. I need to see that all together. We've got costs here. We've got direct costs and possible additional expenses. So those indirect costs, we've got that listed as well. Assumptions, again, it's all there. Same things, just looks a little different. Are you living on campus? Is that your plan? Because there might be an on-campus housing grant we need to look at. And then on this one, there is a kind of a billable cost. Again, then maybe they did that work for you so that they know what your cost is going to be out of pocket, right? So they may look different, but they all have the same pieces. So let's talk about how to find the bottom line. What's going to be an affordable option, or what are you going to be expected to pay? There's a lot of different tools to help students do this. Right now I'm going to schools and having them use those aid offers I just gave you, and I can send you copies. I have them take those aid offers and use this worksheet to calculate their net cost before loans. So I have them take all those aid offers, find the cost minus the free money, and that's what they pay out of pocket. That's on our website at baymaine.com.
I just added it to the chat, and it's a fillable PDF, so it does the math for you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So the online version does the math for you. So you don't even have to do the math. There's all kinds of other tools or spreadsheets. There's always an app for everything. And we have some animated videos on our website, a really cute one on how to compare. So I'm going to show you that in a minute, but all kinds of tools to help you do this. But the end result I really want students to get at is, when you get this aid offer, before you say, yes, this is where I'm going, we need to know how much a school is going to cost. So I take the 3 aid offers and we look at the cost, tuition fees, room and board, those direct costs, minus all of the grants and scholarships. I have you add all of those up and think about it like a coupon, right? So the costs minus the free money, that's what I have to pay out of pocket for 1 year. If Maria and I are going to the same school, we are not paying the same price, because Maria's wicked smart, she's top of her class, so she got a ton of merit aid, and I got a lot of need-based aid because I don't have as much money, right? So it's gonna look different for everybody. That's why I want them to do this calculation. And when we're trying to decide between 3 schools, this helps us say, you know what, I love school A, but school B is a third of the price, or whatever the case might be. And that's a real big deciding factor on like what's going to be affordable. Anything to add to that, Maria?
No, I would just say that, it's whatever tool you use to do this, whether it's ours or something else, it is really important, because you're really not going to be able to take a look at each letter necessarily and know what you're paying against another one because they all look a little bit different. So I've seen some really bang up spreadsheets that people have done for this on their own. Those are the people that are close to my heart. But there's whatever way your students are going to compare these is really important to actually like sit and do the math, and we can come in and help your schools do that or whatever. We're going to have some sessions coming up, I'm sure Nikki will talk about, but I would just add that like really encouraging the deep dive and doing the numbers and spelling it out. And I think for parents, this is really helpful too, because they can say all they want, like, this is too expensive, you can't afford it. But like, until they put the numbers in front of the student, it's really not going to click necessarily. So just whatever tool that is comfortable for the students and families, we recommend doing some kind of comparison because it's really not going to be clear from just the notification.
I also love doing this with students using net price calculators early. If I can get in there, early on before senior year and have them do that net price calculator on a school's website to say, okay, this is my family's income, these are my grades, whatever this it's asking for, then they can get kind of an estimate of how much a school is going to be to know whether or not they need to apply for more schools, or to have a conversation, have it be a conversation starter to say, okay, this is what the school I want to go to looks like. Do we have the ability to pay for this? Or will you help me take out loans? Or will I need to take out loans? Things like that. So early on, I use a spreadsheet with doing an in-class exercise. I think it's super helpful. Really opens people's eyes, I think. Other things to consider, is any of this aid renewable? Meaning, is it going to be offered every single year? Or what do I need to make sure it's offered every single year? And keep in mind that amounts can change because someone's financial situation might change. Like, what if they win that $1 billion lottery? They're probably not going to be eligible for a grant anymore, right? Because their financial situation changed. So keep that in mind. For most people, the aid stays the same, but it's always good to know so it's not a surprise. And keep in mind too that costs could increase every year. I would plan on at least 3% a year of tuition and room and board going up. That was our standard. Every year is 3%. Other things to think about. Okay, so you have heard, if I get a scholarship, I'm going to lose some aid, and that does happen. But I will say it's rare. I would say rare. In my experience, it has been rare. So let's look at that formula. Let's go back to that cost of attendance minus EFC equals need, right? That's the regulation that we have to work with them. So if I met the need with all of the need-based program that I have, but there's still a gap, right? There's still some unmet need there. I can put some scholarships from the high school in there and I can fill that need. But once that money goes over, if I've gotten more in scholarships than I have of unmet need, something's got to give. Either the cost of attendance needs to go up, which can happen if you appeal and say, listen, I had to buy a lot of, like, I had to buy a computer, or I have unusual expenses. You can appeal to have that cost of attendance go up so that the unmet need is higher. Or I've got to get rid of some of this need-based aid. I gotta move something to make room for that scholarship that just came in. Now, I can tell you at my school, rarely happened. I thought it was a fantasy when this did happen, which wasn't often. At my school, when this did happen, I would remove work study from their aid offer because they could still work job bank. Right? Or I could move part of their subsidized loan into an unsubsidized loan. And I think that's pretty much more common. Is that what happened with your school, Maria?
Yeah, where I've worked, the financial aid office generally is always going to try to do whatever's in the best interest of the student when this happens. So rarely people are like, oh, I lost financial aid. I don't think I've ever seen, and I've been at this a long time, where it suddenly like generates a bill, or a student suddenly owes money to the school that they didn't before. Sometimes it's a swap. So it will be like switch out unsub, and you're reducing loan maybe, or you're reducing some work study. they're going to try to fit it, or like, oh, hey, we can increase the loan fees here. Or did you buy a computer? Or did we build in your actual room and board costs versus an estimate? They're always going to act in the best interest of making those funds fit. At one of the schools I worked at, our institutional scholarship, not merit, but the free money from the financial aid office would sometimes we just swap some out. So it's a wash. So it's literally the same, the bill is paid, it's just where the bucket is coming from. So I just want to, when we say like the impact is minimal, I've never seen it like suddenly generate a bill that the student somehow owes. It's just a little bit of a shell game sometimes if there's more need-based aid than unmet need.
Right. And I can say the process is different at every school. So keep in mind that some schools that might happen, that they might lose some aid. Colby, Bates, and Bowdoin, they meet full financial need. They're already filling that whole gap. And if a scholarship comes in, then they might have to reduce some of that grant and scholarship. Honestly, too much money, not a problem for me. I want to throw all the money at the wall and see what happens. And if you have too much money, excellent. That's a great problem to have. But I would encourage folks, if this does happen, to contact financial aid and see if there's something that they can do. Or if there's maybe you didn't realize that we have job bank that you could work versus work study. I know I took away your work study, but like maybe there's another way we can still get you a job on campus. So always reach out to financial aid if that does happen. But I never want anyone to not apply for scholarships because they think they're going to lose something, because honestly, it's not as common as people think. Okay, so other things to think about. How many years will the student be in school? If the student does this calculation, they're like, okay, if I sell a kidney, I can pay for year 1. Well, you need 2 kidneys. So how are you paying for year 2, 3, and 4? So I always like to think about how are we paying for your entire education? And if we have to borrow for that, you never want to borrow more than your first year's salary. I like to use careeronestop.org, but we also have a salary to debt calculator where if you plug in how much you're going to need to borrow, it will tell you how much income you have to earn in order to comfortably make that loan payment. So just as a quick cheat, for every $10,000 that a student is borrowing, we figure about $100 a month. Just fast math in your head. It's not going to be 1,000% accurate, but just keep in mind that that's roughly what we're looking at for a student loan payment. Also, is there other ways to bring the bill down? Like, can they live off campus? I know folks say that they want to live on campus to have that college experience. And I sometimes say, well, that's a $12,000 experience. Like, if you have to borrow and like you're deciding whether to go to that school or not go to that school, there are other ways to get that college experience. There are so many groups and programs on campus that even if you don't live on campus, you can still be connected to the school. So keep that in mind. Okay, so let's talk about affordability. And someone had asked earlier in the chat about when do we accept the aid, I think. Do we accept it before we've actually made a decision?
Yeah, and because of the various timelines and, do you only accept for one school or not?
So before we get into this, I do want to address that because I think this is a good time for it. You can accept the aid at every school. But just keep in mind that you're going to need to go back to the schools that you decide not to go at and just let them know you're not attending. It doesn't necessarily hold your spot like on campus if you're going to be in the dorms. At my school, what I did in the financial aid office did not affect what happened in the dorms. Like I wouldn't be accepting aid for you, so you now have a spot in the dorms. So you can accept it early, but just keep in mind you do want to tell the school when you do decide that you're not going, because the school is going to hold on some of that grant money that another student could use. So
I think that's why you would compare and do that work ahead of time so that you wouldn't necessarily feel so pinched to say like, oh, if I don't accept these, I'm going to lose it. Like if the family's doing the work of, net price calculators ahead of time and that sort of long-term planning, and then also comparing the aid offers. And I think by the time the decision day stuff starts happening, it's more likely that you'll be like, okay, I'm ready to just accept for this one school. Certainly, again, nothing bad is going to happen to the student if they accept aid at multiple schools. They do just need to do the follow-up. Otherwise, they'll continue to get harassed for a while. So with the school, will be like, hey, are you coming? You accepted the aid. What's going on? So,
Right. And if my school goes to process aid for you, and then Maria's school tries to, Maria's going to get a notice that says, sorry, the student's attending somewhere else. So it could cause some not unbreakable things, but it's just going to maybe make some hiccups that are more work for you in the financial aid office. One caveat to that, I will say, if a student doesn't know how much aid they're getting until they go through verification. So if a student files the FAFSA, the feds select them for verification. It means the student has to verify their answers on the FAFSA. I had a student call the other day because they got several verification requests, and they said, do I have to do this at every school? And I said, well, if you want to find out how much aid they're going to give you, because they were not sending an estimated offer, go through verification. Not a big deal. Just maybe don't accept the aid if you don't need to, just to see what that aid offer is. And if there's anyone listening who has a different thought on this, please add that in the chat. I love me some different opinions. Okay, so other considerations, and someone had asked about really the emotion side of this. And I think I often deal with things in a very logical way, but I have to remember that this is super stressful. There's a lot of anxiety, students trying to make the right decision about the rest of their life. And so here are some tips I would say that I always tell students, like, think about this like buying a house. A house is the most expensive thing you'll ever buy in your lifetime. Education is number 2. When you go to buy a house, you don't look at one house and say, that's my house. I think we looked at 40 houses, no joke, like 40, and see, like, which one do you like the best? But when you go on Zillow and you search for a house, the first filter you put in there is the price. And that's going to be a super important factor of this. And if that house is too expensive, you're going to be super happy in another house because you won't be stressed out about the bill every month. So that's kind of one way I phrase this, to try and say, let's think about this in an affordability context. Early conversations, I cannot tell you, people don't want to do this. They don't want to talk about it. It's super stressful, and I get it, because it was hard for me to talk to my kids about this. Talking to them early and often makes that stress less. And I know people think that this is the opposite, but I always tell parents, tell a student if you have any money saved up and say, this is what I have to use, and use this to shop wisely. This really helps them frame how they are shopping for a college. This also helps them go and do some more research to say, do I really need to ramp up my scholarship search, or do I need to save my summer earnings, or, ask instead of gifts for holidays or birthdays, ask for money for college? Like, this really puts them in the driver's seat and actually does reduce the stress versus cause it. I've had a student sit with me the day before school start, trying to figure out how to pay the bill. And let me just tell you what that anxiety level is on a 1,000 out of 1 to 10.
And I'll add another layer of, they made it through 1 year, they made it work, and then they come to us sophomore year and they say, my family can't afford this anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And they've already fallen in love with the school and they've made friends. This is particularly true for students who want to go to like an out-of-state public, because it tends to be very expensive. I know I've had many of those heartbreaking conversations. I know Nikki has as well. And so if we want to avoid, and the answer ends up being sometimes like, it's not financially sustainable and you probably have to transfer. And that's a really crappy real talk conversation to have. And we are willing to do that with students, as heartbreaking as it is. But I think just keeping that in the back of your head of like, let's paint it. And I've said that to families at these ahead of time conversations, like, let me paint you a picture. You've fallen in love with the school, you made it work, you scrimped and scraped and did all the things, and then you can't sustain it. And then you have to leave. And that's a real drag. So I think just planting those seeds early and setting the expectations, saying like, here's a baseline net price we can afford. Here's, the long-term trajectory of this. And then like when you get out, do you want to be saddled with all this debt? I think planting those seeds early and often is much easier to deal with than having the conversation where the student is crying because they have to leave a school that they love.
Yep. This is now my second tier of when a student says, but I have to go to the school and I'll take out a loan. My parents said that they would co-sign it for me. I'm going to borrow for it. And I explained to them about private loans being approved based on credit, but also sometimes income to debt ratio. And when you do that, you take out that loan for year 1 and then year 2. But by year 3, the bank says, you've already borrowed so much that we maybe won't give you any more loans, and they can't finish the program. So sometimes that's not doable. Like, it's just, saying I'm just going to borrow for it is not actually an option for folks sometimes. So just even laying out like what that looks like long term for borrowing that much. Again, this doesn't have to be the end all be all. Maybe we start locally at a community college, live at home for year 1. And I had a student the other day, this will save them $30,000. Then transfer. Many schools have that path already built. They have articulation agreements, and they say, if you're going to start there, these are the classes you need to take to transfer to our school year 2. So schools are ready for this, and they're built for it, but you just have to communicate. But so this is an option, and options are so important. I hate being boxed into just one option. I love casting a wide net. Let's see what they offer me, because I can tell you at my school, what we offered in aid changed every year. One year we needed students from Connecticut, so we gave a bunch of students scholarships because they were from Connecticut. Like, you never know what a school is going to offer you. So it's always great to apply to a bunch, even if you think it's out of reach financially. Just keep in mind that you're going to do this work and figure out what that cost is before accepting. Okay, so why compare? Why do this comparison? Again, all the aid offers do look different. I've seen aid offers where what they offered you was like this long, but it was all loans, right? So picking apart those pieces and seeing what that bottom line is going to do, what that means to you, what you're paying out of pocket, super important. We don't want to buy that house without knowing how much it costs, right? And a higher education is a long-term financial investment. If you do have to borrow, I feel like it's okay to invest in yourself in borrowing, but let's just do it wisely. Let's look at that total program cost versus your income that's going to be at the end. And I'm going to be the first person to say, like, education is the key to life. I firmly believe that. That's why I do this job. Maria, I know you feel the same way. But like, for most people, this is the pathway out of low income, right? I think education is the key to so many different things. Don't even get me started on this, okay? I could go on forever. We have a handout that you can use on faymain.com website. It's the pathway to higher education. This is great for starting that conversation, which again, do early and often. On the backside, our conversation starters, and I think this is the key that we give parents or families to tell students, this is how much we can help you. And that really empowers the student to really, look for their search or reach out or advocate for themselves, because this is what we want them to be doing, right? When they leave high school, we want them to be able to do this critical thinking and advocate for themselves. So this kind of gives you a piecemeal approach, just to keep in mind that it's not one thing that pays that bill. Like, there's a bunch of different things that we can do to get ready to pay the bill and to do it. Okay, so again, if you want folks, if we can help do this comparison, we offer one-on-one financial aid coaching. This is what it looks like on the website. If you go to faymain.com/contact, you'll see where you can schedule a time for folks to have us help. But we're also going to be offering workshops at night where you guys can join, excuse me, and we'll kind of go over the pieces and parts and work on that aid offer with you to see what it costs, and kind of, we can even do some, what's the word I'm looking for here? Brainstorming on how to pay that bill, right? What's your major? Did you know we have the Educators for Maine loan? I mean, there's all kinds of different things that we might know about that you aren't aware of. So send them our way. And we're ready, like Maria said, we can have that real talk and discuss our experiences with students who made this decision without looking at the financial piece of it. So we can weave in discussions about that long-term investment and the costs and what that means to you. So just wanted to have you guys save the date. Next month, February 8th, Florica is going to unveil resources for new Mainers. I think what we have done with this program is amazing. So join her for this next Wednesday webinar that's coming up. That's going to be awesome. Any questions?
Yeah, Nikki, there's a couple good things that popped in that I want to make sure that we get to. This is a common question, a great one. Is there any room to negotiate financial aid with the college? Would you do that with your college's financial aid or admissions office?
Love that. So I think you are never out by asking. They're not going to take any aid away if you ask. So you are never out. I always go at it with the attitude of, this other school is going to be more affordable for me. Is there anything else you can do? Versus they get more money than, the school isn't necessarily, there's not a lot of cake to hand out, folks. So just keep in mind that sometimes that will work for you, or sometimes we'll uncover that, you can't pay for the bill because, someone in the family has huge medical expenses. And when I hear that, I can say, have you thought about appealing your financial aid? And maybe we can go that route. So you are never out anything by asking. And I would go to the financial aid office. Also, admissions doesn't hurt either. Can't hurt either way, but I'd start with financial aid.
Well, and I think you would go to admissions for like merit in particular. So if there's a question about, because sometimes merit is based on SAT scores, which is kind of rare now because a lot of places did away with that, but class ranking and GPA and things like that. Always, I agree with Nikki 100%. My phrasing is always like, you have nothing to lose by asking. And sometimes I've worked with families where I'm like, let's come up with a number. Like how much more, like is $1,000 going to be the make or break to come here? Then you can go to school and say like, if I could just get like $1,000 more, so we don't have to borrow that'd be great. If you can come kind of having done some of the work. I know that when I was in a financial aid office, that was always like, okay, let's see, we've got this little bucket of money over here. We might be able to make something work. So I think that always good to, always fine to ask. And, keeping in mind that there might not be a solution. And, certainly someone who's got like a full need-based zero EFC and full need, all the need-based aid they can get might not be able to appeal necessarily. But I think it's always worth having a conversation and saying like, what else is out there? Or do you recommend scholarships? Make friends with the financial aid office. As Nikki and I are former financial aid office people, we're cool. They want to help. So make friends with the financial aid office, or encourage students to do that for lots of reasons, but particularly to have those open conversations.
And just another thing that I mentioned there, I love that a student asks. I mean, families definitely can be involved in the conversation, but I think it carried more weight for me when the student asked.
Agreed.
But I kept a list of people who, like, if my first answer was I don't have anything, if another student says I'm not going to come to the school, it freed up some money. I know who needs it. So I kept a list. So I definitely have people reach out.
I had a running duckling list of like, oh, hey, I got to come back to that one. Another question, Nikki, that's a really good one that came in is from a counselor. I have a student who the parent did not pay taxes. What are the options that she might have? I'm guessing maybe didn't file or didn't pay, but either way, if there's something going on with the taxes, what do we want to share about that?
So I've seen this, folks can't complete the FAFSA because they needed to file taxes and did not. Please send them my way so I can discuss with them what it looks like when the IRS finally finds you, because they will. But if a student just cannot get that FAFSA filed, first off, this year with free community college, from what I understand, if the student cannot get parent information on the FAFSA, the community college system will work with the student to get them in and get their free community college without the FAFSA. The process is going to be different at every school, but keep that in mind. Without parent information, I'd have a conversation with financial aid and see if If maybe the student has been found homeless by the high school, then we don't need parent information. If the student has a dangerous mentally or physically situation by working with the parents, that's another scenario where we don't need parent information. So it's definitely good to have a conversation with financial aid to see if there's any way that they would meet the criteria to not list parent information. But if it's just straight up that the parent is going to refuse, the student's kind of stuck. I hate that.
Yeah, they can get an unsubsidized loan, so they will go through and say like, I'm unable to provide, and the FAFSA will sort of say like, do you have this circumstance or whatever? And if it's really just a flat out refusal, there is a caveat that like the parent that kind of has to like, in order to get that unsubsidized loan, the parent there has to be a statement that says like, I refuse to provide information. So it kind of puts them on the accountability hook. We are also willing at FAME to have that conversation with parents. So I, at a number of times, have had that conversation. Look, you're not on the hook for anything. You just need to put your information in the FAFSA. It doesn't obligate you to pay anything. It doesn't obligate you to do any of that. It's just a borrowing of your information so that the student can get all the aid that's available to them. So we are happy to have that conversation because I think sometimes just hearing it from another person can be helpful. To that question, if let's say they filed the taxes, but they owe money, that's not going to impact their FAFSA. So if they like owe money and they didn't pay, that's like a different problem. But it's not going to impact the FAFSA itself.
Right.
The kicker there is if they were required to file taxes and did not. More questions coming in. Okay, so Tamisa just, hi Tamisa, asked the question, a student desperately wants to attend college, but the parent will in no way fill out the FAFSA. How can they get around this? Kind of just what we talked about, is there, I would, send them my direction. We can sort of suss out some information that, put on our financial aid officer hats and I'll say like, they could go to community, if they're a 2023, 22, 21 or 20 grad, community college would be the option right now because it's free, although that window closes after 2024. And then just us trying to have conversations, and sometimes they have to deep dive into what the household circumstances are for that.
And it might be that they're just like, I'm working with someone right now who thinks the parent will not do the FAFSA because they think they're on the hook to pay. That is absolutely not true. Zero truth to that. And yeah. I'm happy to have that conversation. I think that is a big hang up.
And sometimes they think for whatever reason, they're like, I don't want the government knowing it's like, it's all information they already have, right? So there's different reasons that people do and do not want to do that. And we can certainly help kind of triage the situation and figure out maybe a path that the student can go down or have the conversation with those parents. And then if it's like, I can't even talk to my parent about it, it's a toxic situation, then we can say, okay, well, if the case can be made for that, then maybe we can do something like an override and not include the parents. Similar question, I just want to make sure we get, because it popped in, the FAFSA asks if your parent claims you as dependent, can you choose not to claim as dependent? Will this help their aid package? The FAFSA doesn't ask about, it's not claiming for dependence on tax purposes. So, who claims the student on a tax return has no bearing on who is the parent on the FAFSA.
Yeah, I think that's confusing because the FAFSA and the IRS use that same language, dependent.
Yeah.
They are two different things. The IRS has a dependency thing that is not. The FAFSA has a list of questions to determine whether or not you're a dependent and if you need parent information.
Yeah, and so if, for this current cycle, it's, who did the student live with most in the last 12 months, whether or not that parent claimed the student on their tax return. Things are shifting around in future cycles, but just bear that in mind. And certainly we can help, triage that. We do have a little video, an animated video, like, who is my parent? Am I dependent? Are you my mom? I call that the, like, are you my mommy chart, right? Like, like the Dr. Seuss book, like who goes where on the FAFSA. Mm-hmm. But that is how they're looking at the household, at least for this current cycle. Changes TBD.
To be, right? One thing I wanted to add to that is that the FAFSA is not the end all be all. Like sometimes there's other ways to pay for school that don't include doing the FAFSA for someone who maybe it's going to go to school. We can look at maybe some schools that offer merit aid, or maybe there's some scholarships from the financial aid office that don't require the FAFSA. Maybe they just have to be a redheaded kid from Aroostook County. There's other things, the adult learner scholarship, there's other avenues to pay. There's a lot of great workforce development funding to help people get some training. Eastern Maine Development Corp has a good program. Goodwill Industries, I think, is handling the education and training, employment and training. Used to be FSET, Maria. It's for folks that are receiving SNAP benefits.
I'm drawing a blank.
Yep. I think it's SNAP Employment and Training Program, but there's
Yeah.
other programs to help pay for school that the FAFSA maybe is not related to it at all. So we're coming up on 2 o'clock. Any other questions we want to add?
I'm answering one in writing now. And then I have to bounce off because speaking of financial aid coaching, I have to go do a couple of appointments. So sign up on our website and you'll land one of us, or encourage your students to do that. And thank you for joining us. You all asked great questions, so thanks for that.
Yes, thanks for joining us.